Good morning. Welcome to 2025 Tech 4 Conference. You've joined the first session of the conference. We are hosting our first workshop focusing on cybersecurity. With us today is Maria Scarmato, founder and CEO of Praxis Data Security. Maria is a data specialist who provides expertise and guidance in GRC, risk management. She's currently spending a lot of time helping organizations with their CMMC and technology partners help their customers meet CMMC guidance. And she has a variety of other area expertises. And today she's going to help you go through a guided self-assessment of your general cybersecurity as well as your governance. We do have, for safety and privacy purposes, everybody's cameras turned off and microphones muted. But if you'd like to ask Maria a question, please feel free to raise your hand and I will unlock you at that time. Maria, just for a point of reference, would you like to be interrupted during your session, or would you like to hold those questions till the end?
Thank you. I would like to be interrupted as much as possible. I want this to be as interactive as it can be, and asking questions in real time would be also good. Thank you.
Very good. So again, if anybody would like to ask any questions of Maria, please raise your hand and I will interrupt Maria and turn on your camera and mic so that you are able to ask her a question. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat through the entire conference and I will be monitoring that, and Maria will also be able to respond when she has an opportunity between conversation points. Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, Christopher, for the great introduction. And it is a big passion of mine and why we do what we do at Praxis is helping the businesses in their risk management, getting baselines and making sure that cybersecurity is being maintained and matured. And I think that's why we did the purpose of building these two forms that we're going to be going through together as a workshop. One of the things that I did a class, that this weekend that made me really, really think about while I was prepping for this. I was taking students through the risk management framework, and the core component of that preparation is the understanding of why we do this risk management for organizations. And within the NIST documentation and everything that we've learned through those classes and forms and everything that has been developed is that it has to be very holistic and organizational. And more executives are handing it off to the IT teams, and the IT teams are doing a great job of doing what they do for IT. But in reality, cybersecurity risk management is an entire organization issue. It starts at the top with executives having buy-in and boards or business owners understanding what their responsibility is for the risk management of their organization. And that's why I developed a non-technical cybersecurity assessment for even IT individuals to be able to give for executives to start measuring where they are in a very non-technical sense. So I'm excited to share that with you and work through it with everybody. And the second part of the risk management framework, as risk management is a living thing in an organization, just like their financial risk. And they're constantly, we have taxes and going through all of those things. Cybersecurity is no different. So we have, I've also developed a governance worksheet. So we start looking at governance, and what I hope to show through these two worksheets, and whether we're developed for the executive teams and the leadership, is so that they can see where they're lacking and why it's important. So using that language to have these conversations, and hopefully these two documents and these two exercises will be a starting point of conversation as a tool. They're by no means intended to be a full comprehensive risk assessment, but really a starting point for the conversation. So I will go ahead and get started showing you this. And while we go through it, I will stop and pause and answer questions. I will be running through it as we're doing a mock style. So I will start my share. And again, just to reiterate, as far as in all of the risk documentation, level one is organization, level two is mission. So when we're preparing, as I was saying, to do a risk assessment, scope is very important. And understanding where the organization is, what the organization does, what industry they're in, what their mission and business processes are, what's important to them is very important. So as we run through this, I want us to think about how it would be different for every organization. There's some organizations that don't deal with any PII. So any privacy information is not important to them. It doesn't pose a high risk. And some of them that's all they do. So that weighs so much heavier than another organization. Also with their missions, with their processes. Those need to be taken into account while asking the questions. And like I said, we have the information system is really the supporting the entire business, and even the IT needs to understand what the business does and how it runs and what the processes are in order to give the correct cybersecurity in their technical controls. And that's why on these questions, we're also going to be asking a lot of the administrative controls that give a big view of that administrative and technical controls, and hopefully they start working together. So we're going to start with the operational risk of a company. So question one, again, how are you regulated as your industry in regard of data protection or cybersecurity? Again, we have Department of Defense, that CUI, we're protecting it. And even then, you have to think about how much and how little. These are going to be high level questions so we get an idea, but I'll give you a little bit more nuts of information because we have, even while we're working with our CMMC customers, their risk differs within that industry. There's some organizations that only 30% of their business is government business. So we really, reduce the scope and try to make that area secure. And some of them are 90%. And so while you have these conversations, do you have any non-negotiable regulations like PCI, CMMC, those CUI, PII in healthcare, finance investments, those SOC audits, SOX as well, the publicly traded companies. Or are you more moderately regulated, such as the FERPA, the energy, where we have different types of data and the requirements are a little bit differently? Or is it lightly regulated, such as the retail and hospitality? In construction, we're putting it in there, but there's a lot that we're running into in construction that are going after those contracts in the government space. Again, I want to highlight with this little moment that part of the organization and their mission is also understanding if that business wants to get into those industries. So you may go through this and they say, well, we're right now we're in construction, but we don't do anything, but we would like to start bidding on government contracts. That changes the answer right away. And that may be a little insight that you get within the conversation of how we can start building for their cybersecurity needs and where they are, depending on those questions. We'll continue to what size of the business. So we have, just because there's more people, obviously fewer people, fewer risk, but is it really? There could be 5 people in an organization and none of them have any cybersecurity. Having no cybersecurity in place poses a very large risk. So this is really understanding how many people, when we put in, are these employees or contractors? Again, this is 1, 2, 3 to start the conversation, but you start understanding, are they full-time employees? Do we have lots of contractors coming into their environment and using their resources? How is the training? The more people, the more training and security awareness training becomes very, very important. Not that it's not important with fewer than 5 people, but the information can get disseminated so much better to 5 people than when we're trying to communicate it to 500 people. How much does your work or IT is outsourced to third parties, vendors, contractors, MSPs? This question really understands how this business processes are. Again, these are non-technical questions, but we're getting a lot of technical insight into their environment. If they are outsourcing everything, we're talking about more of SLAs, which means they have less IT, but we have to look at how their IT is managed in interaction with those third parties. Are those critical functions uh, outsourced? So if they have no outsourced IT, like no MSP, and everything that they're doing is inside of their organization, that's the conversation of how trained is the person taking care of their IT, or do they have a trusted MSP partner? Um, Again, these are risk-based depending on what those usually infer, but it gives you a lot of good technical information without asking a technical question. If it's
Maria,
yes,
real quick, Mary Elizabeth is asking for clarification on question 3. Is this also related to who runs IT infrastructure such as Azure, backup vendors, etc.?
yes, and thank you for that question. Yes, it's kind of just getting an idea of who's running their IT. And can you just give me a little bit more? I don't know if I answered your question, so can you just flesh that out just a little bit more? And if you can't, that's fine. Because what I think you're asking, and how I'm understanding it is, yes, we are looking for where the data security is and who's running it. And when we're talking about risk assessment, the administrative controls, the technical controls, we're also asking, doing that data flow, and where's the data at, who has the data, how is it being managed, who's managing it, and the fact that the business owner or the executive team is responsible for knowing those things. So, as far as risk, we're kind of figuring out if they even know the answer. So, using this as a tool, if they're like, we're not sure, that's an answer in itself of where that risk is. But as far as the question on the third parties and MSPs, it is important to know. And we start on the administrative side is, do they know where those SLAs, how do they know this is being protected? So again, this is very high level, but we're getting so much information in. And again, the audience and the focus is a business owner. So when you're asking them these questions and they don't know, it does make it for a conversation starter. So
And
I'm
Mary Elizabeth said that that does answer her question.
okay. Thank you. And then we get to number 4 is how does what type of data does your business handle? So I know we asked a lot about the regulated industry there at the very beginning, but that is, what a business owner knows. If they don't know what type of data they handle, that's a problem, and that poses a high risk. Um, and I keep reiterating it, and I am trying not to sound like a broken record, but knowing what the audience is and the purpose of this document is so important. We don't want IT to answer this. IT can get the technical ones. This is for the business owner to really drive home the point that they need to know this. And if they don't, that's a problem. So we have what kind of data do you handle? CUI, financial social security numbers. When we ask them, no, we're not in healthcare, so we don't have any PII. And they don't know how HR runs and where HR puts their employees' information, contractor information. Then they don't that needs to be talked about in their business, because now they do have a PII problem, even though they're not in a PII space. And if they say, well, we outsource everything, and all of these kind of tie together, they say we do have a third party. We use QuickBooks, and it's okay, but how does that data get into QuickBooks? Um, and so when they say what kind do you handle, we're not asking what kind do you work with. It's what kind do you as a business handle? And do they have even GDPR, the EU things? Do they hire people from there, not just take in that information? And are they making sure that they're following those requirements? So that's just on that question. I really wanted to highlight that it's what do they handle, not what they work in. So we'll get a score from that, and then we get into the risk mitigation maturity, and this is how they handle it. Do you have any written cybersecurity policies and procedures? If they say something like, I'm not sure, maybe HR has that, then that we need to talk about how they, how do we know that their risk is being taken care of and information is being disseminated to their employees. And so we have no documents, policies, some informal. A lot of times we hear, well, we don't have any written down, but we talk about it all the time. Or, I try to send them an email once a week to let them know we've heard all of those. But and that's better than nothing. And that's why we have this range here. But it should be fully documented. And again, when you're talking to the leadership and business owners, they need to understand that they are liable for any problems that their employees have with certain data. They're liable for having known and disseminated the information and trained their employees. So those are so important, not only to lower the risk, but lower liability within for the executive team.
Maria,
Um,
Teresa's got her hand raised. I got her. Teresa, I've got your account open. You can come on and ask her your question. Teresa, you're gonna need to unmute.
and thanks, Christopher, because I can't see the screen while I'm going through.
No problem. You can go ahead and continue. I'll work with Teresa and see if I can get her, and then we'll interrupt you again when.
Where all of this ties into each other, so this we can always come back and it will
Can you
be
hear me
relevant.
There you
Oh,
are, Teresa. Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
good
Okay,
morning.
Maria, thank you so much for your presentation so far. I do have a question on the third party data handling. So when this organization, or the business sends off this data for the third party, how often do you access them for risk management, for the third party risk management assessment? How often do you do that? Or how often would you advise a
Oh, for
company?
your third party.
Yes, when they're handling your
So
data, how often is that assessment made in order to validate, the safety, the privacy, and the availability of those data as and when needed?
thank you for that question. It's actually a really amazing question. As far as assessing, it should be your third party risk management should be an established thing at an organization. And I know we think that's only for large organizations, but it's now part of a lot of compliances and requirements because of the importance of it. And it should be a set system already. You should have, so if you're dealing with a QuickBooks as an example again, you should make sure that the SLA is in place. You've read the SLA or you have it documented and you know where the lines of responsibility begin and end. And with a contractor, you should have had some their master service agreement or something that has a clause, or you tell them, do your own little questionnaire. Do you have these 8 basic cybersecurity hygienes? And that should be something that as you have a third party and then have a process within your risk management for third parties to review at least yearly or something that triggers it off. So let's say we need to renew our license for QuickBooks, do we have all of those? Do we have the most up-to-date SLA, the policies from using them? As you know, and I keep using QuickBooks just because it's easy and it's at the top of my head. They will have a new privacy law or they've changed their agreements, and you should have something like that, maybe trigger it or set it as an annual thing to audit all of your third parties and make sure you have them up to date. So either one of those kind of works.
Okay, so would you advise these regular checks or assessment be a part of the service level agreement?
Yes, I think that it should, at the service level agreement, there should be language on what they are doing to safeguard the data and what they hold.
Okay, Thank you.
So we have privacy policies and procedures. And then do you train or inform your employees about cybersecurity? And I touched on that when we're talking about the policies and procedures. That is so very important. And I know I said, we've heard a little bit of everything. Like, no, everybody here knows, especially in the smaller organizations. And remember, these small organizations and small companies are still very impactful in many supply chains or, just in general for, the business community. And they feel like very familial, and we can keep that familial feel but still say, we need to communicate this, and while using this as a tool, um driving home the point that we need to, again, the business owner is responsible for this organization at all levels, very much like taxes, and they are responsible for it. So, and then the levels of this is no training or communication, occasional email reminders, memos, annual basic training. Those are fine and they work, but it's been proven that consistency and constantly getting it in front of them. So those, and there's no excuse these days with some of the tools that there are to do the security awareness training is there's some really, really well priced point for small business. But even if you have somebody in your organization and there's a lot of free, and just set reminders, and this is when we talk about the governance, you can set up a system within an organization that will work for the budget. So number 7, do you have a documented plan for responding to a cyber incident? I think more and more, we all know it's not if, when, and it so it became so cliche. So I hate even saying it all the time. Uh, but it is very true. There's low hanging fruit, and a lot of the bad actors can get $1,000 very easily from 10 companies instead of the 50 a million from a large company that takes for them it's a long sales cycle for it all, and to try to get in there. So these cyber incidents aren't, I think I used to talk to people like, oh, never, and now I hear saying, yes, that is, in our trade association, we're having a huge cyber incident conversations because so many people, so many organizations have been hit. And, we have the rise of the cyber insurance doing the same thing. So this responding to cyber incidents, again, having a plan makes it so easy. And the reason there's levels in here because it's not either you have it or you don't. It's, is it written? Is it tested annually? Does everybody know? Even does, if something happens, does anybody know what to do? Do you know if we have to report to people, to the attorney general? Because you can start getting fines right away if it hasn't been reported accurately, and then those are just added costs that keep increasing the risk to an organization. In fact, Texas just passed one of their laws that it's a safe haven law. So if companies have minimal security standards, they are immune from any punitive damages, and that includes having an incident response plan. So there's a lot of research and knowing how important it is to have that in there and how much it will lower risk. I know this is having happened, but you mitigate that risk so much faster. Just having a written plan and just knowing that the 4 people in the office know what they're doing and know what the next step is. And they don't know unless they practice it. Are are your physical devices secure? You will be amazed how many organizations to this day have say, well, I buy everything from Costco, and then we just turn it on and plug it in and turn it on, and it's, we get the Microsoft license, and we're good. I think I have McAfee on my computer, and that's it. So that's the worst case scenario, and we still hear it all the time uh, for some of the organizations. But there is a lot more, again, with the rise of an MSP, having a great technology partner that can help you make sure that your devices are secure. Um, that is one of the biggest things to lower your risk as an organization. But you see, you have company issued ones, company issued devices with passwords, locks. So we can that gauge is pretty large. Do you have employees that are managed remotely, and how is that access managed? I know after COVID, everybody went to remote, and there was lots of issues with non-security during that time that had to be mitigated. But there's some that still haven't. That just, we went remote in 2020, and we never went back, and it's great, and nothing has happened. So we hear a little bit of everything, and then we have some that say, we have all of the remote policies in place. We have secure tools. We monitor. We have Intune set up. We have, a lot of security involved. And then there's some that just, nah, Joe took his computer home and he works from there. No problem. He can access his email. And then how often do you back up business critical data? This one, again, this is more for business continuity. So we try to hit incident response, business continuity, all with no technical terms. This is something that a business owner can say, we either do it, we don't do it, we do regular backups. And again, as I said, if they don't know, that is something that needs to be addressed. And just because it's either occasional, not automated, doesn't necessarily mean it's high risk, because it also depends on the business and what is their critical data. So it best case scenario, everything's automated, encrypted. Something happens, they have it back up. But there are so many companies that don't back up anything or assume. There's a lot of assuming going on. Oh, well, my IT person takes care of it, or doesn't Microsoft do that? So we get a lot of those answers. So I will, and I forgot to score these, but I will do a little mock score. I'm going to put in and we'll say that we're a mid-sized company. It's like 20 to 99 people. We have everything mostly in-house. Oh, sorry, I keep putting a 5. You can uh you can put any letter or number in there to mark it. And we are we believe that we have um some data here. So we now have a score of 20 there. Do we have, yeah, we have basic things in place. We sometimes send some memos out, and we have a informal plan. Everybody kind of knows what we're supposed to do. And our computers, are they secured? I'll say we have passwords at least. Well, basic protections. I feel pretty confident about that. And we do have remote workers, and we just have basic protections. We think that's good enough. And do we have any critical? Honestly, I don't know if we have critical basic. What is our basic data? I'm not sure, but I'm sure um, we do. I remember telling everybody we should do backups. So we have our score here, and we'll come to this page. And oh, where is my score? Here, our max score is 30. My score is a 21. So we get here, and again, like I said, we are 21 here in the risk maturity, and we have critical risk. Your business faces significant cybersecurity risk, and you need immediate attention. That's 21. But we're right here. We're right at the edge of high risk and critical risk. So we have some gaps in our posture, and we need to start prioritizing some improvements. Again, this is just a tool to kind of start that conversation. Here's a little bit more information on what the high risk would be. And if we go here, our business risk is at a 13, which indicates this is your high risk as well. So we have to start talking about, and let's look at these answers that I chose. This is a business that it's kind of regulated. I may be doing things for education, or I support a legal. a law office, or I am a law office. I have, it's, 20 to 100 people, and we have mostly everything in-house, which makes sense for 20 to 99 people, and we have some vendors. And we do, being a law office, keep a lot of records. So if we don't, within that, and not having a lot of risk mitigation maturity, these are the things that we're going to have to address. So this is the conclusion of the non-technical risk assessment for business owners. So the conversation, does anybody have any questions before I move on to the governance conversation?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from Jim. He wants to know if he wants a high score or a low score.
For we want a low score.
That's true for all risk assessments pretty much across the board, right? Is higher score means you're more vulnerable, more at risk, you're less mature, you haven't gotten further, and the lower the score means the better you've achieved.
Yes, that's pretty much for all of them. We work in a world where, and I had this conversation again this past weekend when we were going through risk framework. How it's measured is different. We have all these GRC tools, and they'll measure risk in some way, and you've got to go read on how this certain risk assessment is. But for the most part, most of the ones that we see is you want to have lower risk than higher risk. So if you think about it that way, and it's not necessarily an arbitrary number where we have this baseline, but we always want to have less risk in an organization and get it as low as possible. It's never going to be zero. And as you will see here, in these tools, it's never going to be zero risk. There's always going to be some type of inherent risk.
So my joke for you is going to be then cybersecurity is like golf. It takes a long time. It probably costs a lot of money, and you're trying to get as small a score as you can get.
That's exactly right. I'm going to use that from now on.
Okay.
Yes.
Are there any other questions for the general technical before we move on? Either raise your hand or ask them in the chat. Okay. And in case anybody didn't notice it, I did share these workbooks with you. The non-technical we just finished and the governance, they're in the chat. You're welcome to download those. And I provided some instructions for both regular business attendees and for MSP and service providers that Maria had given me previously. And her contact information is in here, so you can follow up with her after the conference or after the session. But Maria, go ahead and continue because there's no further questions.
Okay. So going back to the risk management framework for a minute and understand how important governance is. And everything, again, all my readings, I do spend a ridiculous amount of time reading NIST publications, which I don't advise to people if you don't want to go to sleep often. Yes, Teresa, sorry. I did see your hand raised.
You can go ahead and unmute, Teresa. I've already unlocked your account.
Okay. Hello, Maria. Yeah, when you were speaking with respect to, I think, number 9 or 10, that has to do mainly with the business continuity, when it talked about the incidents documentation. Okay, on the risk part of it, when we're talking with non-technical risk, right? What is the best way you will advise for these incidents to be, documented that would dichotomize the tech from the non-tech?
So the risk assessment that we just went is addressing both tech and non-tech risk. We're just asking it without asking technical questions due to our audience. But with the, were you asking me if when you start?
No, my question is, how do you dichotomize, how do you differentiate when you're documenting between the non-tech and the tech in order to make it one full document whereby we can see the non-tech and we can also see the tech?
Okay, so that's a higher level question, but it all should be in one document. It all adds to the holistic risk of an organization. But if you are going to be running a much larger risk assessment where we're using a framework, a NIST, a CIS, And we're asking, do you have a policy and procedure for that? The way you run a large risk assessment is that you ask these controls, but you prior to starting a risk assessment, while you're doing the preparation. And as we talked about, we're understanding the organization, the mission, its business processes, and all of those things while we're prepping for it to get a very individual score for an organization.
Yes.
We, during that portion of prep of a risk assessment, we're already categorizing the types of risk for them. So
Good.
if we're documenting, we're starting, that's where we start the risk registry.
Yes.
And for an organization, you start registering and documenting lack of policy and procedure. That's a risk. Um, or just and threats for, and then we can talk about the technical threats for a specific organization. And within your risk registry, when you're running a large full scale risk assessment, the risk registry is where you note what type of risk is associated to that question.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a very good point. With the way I wrote this assessment, there's many risks that we can associate to each one question. Again, trying to get I wrote these and trying to get as much information from an organization as possible without making it a very long risk assessment. So I packed them with many. So if you go back to the question the one you asked about the incident response, we have many risks involved there, including some technical controls as well, because within their technology, again, would be on a larger scale. Within their technology, do they have a SIM? Do they have a SOC? Or do they have monitoring? Do they have alerts set up?
Yes.
That's how that question will get more granular. But also, do they test it? Do they have a written document? So there's a lot of components to each one of these questions.
Okay. Thank you. So it's always good to categorize and
Yes.
register them. So that way we'll be able to dichotomize between the non-technical and the technical when
Yes.
everything is like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and when you're running a large scale risk assessment, you are asking all of these questions, very granular. And what the outcome of a risk assessment will be a poem, a plan of action and milestone. And when you deliver that plan of action and milestone to an organization, that's where they're also going to be split apart. You are missing policies. That's an administrative one. You should have, an alert system for incidents. And then because of how you run the risk assessment and how you've weighted it for that organization, it shows in there how much lower their risk will go up, will go down if they implement that. So that is on a full scale risk assessment. And that that's how I took that formatting and created these to be very much more high level. Thank you.
Teresa, something that Maria and I have talked about a few times is when you're looking at a security risk assessment, whether it be a generic NIST or a industry specific one like PCI for credit card compliance, those controls are very, very heavy on the technical side with, are your technology doing this? Are your technologies doing this? Are your technologies doing this? And while that may be true from a controls perspective, an organization's implementation of technologies is actually some of the smallest amount of work that they've got to do. The hugest amount of work, and I'm saying that in that way to draw attention to it, is that you have all these policies in the back end. If you don't have those policies, the technologists don't have the right answers. They may be guessing and they may be making the wrong decision and putting your business at larger and grander risk than is really appropriate, more than you really want. So the technologists may have more controls to answer, but their job should be to help the organization make sure that the answers to those questions have been given from the owner's risk tolerance and from the from the amount of liability that an organization can take on, either for themselves or on behalf of partners and customers and vendors that they're working with. Maria, do you want to dig into any of that any further to go on with Teresa's question before we move on to that next questionnaire?
Yeah, no, and I can and lead into the governance portion as well. Yeah, so I keep going back to how risk assessment is run. Did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
No, I was saying thank you to Christopher for the input.
So when we're about to run a risk assessment, and it speaks to how important all of the aspects, administrative controls, just as much as the technical controls. And Christopher's right, there might be more questions to answer. And when we're doing that prep phase of understanding the company, that risk appetite is something only the business leaders can answer. The technology team can't make that decision, that risk-based business decision for the organization, but many times it's put on them. Again, that IT, and I mentioned this at the front, I should have shared the visual from the documentation. The information services, that IT is the base, but they have to know what the business wants and how the risk, what's important to them, all those things. And there's a big disconnect right now through every organization, that those conversations aren't happening, which within itself makes such a big it's a large risk, and that's one of the things I really wanted to capture with this, and make sure that the business owners understand they have to make those decisions, even though they're leaning their on their IT team to implement most of it and support them.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
That goes back to the risk management and the governance portion of it. The other very important is that all of this is living. We can get a baseline of risk, but then we have to either maintain or mature it. And those are two different things, but have the same you get to them the same way. Like I said, you have the plan of action and milestones, and you can a business owner and executive a board can look at it and say, you know what, we want to just maintain this. But as you know, technology threats change. There's threats that come and go, different bad actors creating new ways to attack. Um, and also just business. Again, the business owner may say, I want to start a new line of business and not communicate that at all to the IT team. That happens every day. And then, they're opening up themselves for a lot of technology risks there because the IT team doesn't know, you know, or they might not even know when we go to the things that they are now going to be uh, responsible for new cybersecurity requirements to go into that line of business? Are they getting in more data? So all of that is to say that if you can't just set it and go, the governance has to go, keep happening. That as we spoke earlier about the third party risk management, are we getting new vendors? How do we have a process for that? And so all of this is an ongoing thing, even to maintain the same level of cybersecurity. And it can't be that you test it today and then you test it in a year, because so much has changed in a business. If you think about, again, lines of business, new vendors, um, change in direction, change in risk appetite, change in revenue. All of those things are happening because the company is a living, breathing thing. And so you have to continue the governance of it. Do we have new employees? Are we growing in employees? So the next portion, and I know I only have 15 more minutes to go through this. I created a self-assessment for governance maturity. And again, these are conversation starters. These are things for business owners to think about, and ways for them to understand the impact of why it's so important to have the governance and the self-assessment and what risk they're in charge of right now. So let me share the next one. And again, I tried to make them. Okay. We start with, I'm trying to see, we also have 10 questions here. We don't have them split up on this one. And we'll go ahead and get started, and because of the 15 minutes, I'll start answering in real time. To what extent is executive leadership involved in cybersecurity strategy and risk decision? This one's big because they can say, IT takes care of everything, which is, I have said many times, we hear that often. Or I don't do that. HR handles that. We hear that. Informed occasionally, but not engaged. Sometimes we are in an organization where they have major cybersecurity. They're a regulated industry, and you cannot get the owner to be part of a conversation. They have no clue. And it's, 200-person company in a very regulated industry, which blows my mind every time. And then getting that business unit in charge of it to pull them in by explaining to them their responsibility, especially because they're such a regulated industry. Regularly informed and not consulted, and actively leading and accountable for cybersecurity governance. We have, and we're going to be talking about this in tomorrow's session. We have been engaged with some wonderful business owners that have said, you know what, this is really important. We're not even in a regulated industry, and they're very active and accountable for their cyber because they understood the importance of it for their livelihood and the livelihood of their organization. So for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to say that we're pretty middle of the road. We're involved. We know it's important during these majors and compliance efforts, but then I really just hand it off to somebody else. Does your organization manage cybersecurity policies and procedures? I've already stated the importance of the policies and procedures and how. So we have no formal policies. Policies are informal and outdated. That's the most common answer that we get, and this is why it's so important for the governance one. Policies are informal. Yes, we had a company write some policies a few years ago, and HR hands it out when we have onboarding. So for a lot of these requirements, we need to have these updated policies. Are they versioned? Just because, again, things change in an organization and threats change. So if you think about it, 10 years ago, MFA was not a thing, and now it is no brainer. Everybody should have MFA as at a minimum. And so that jump didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually and due to threats and due to the risk of not having it. So if you don't have it in your policy, that now we changed, our cybersecurity to making MFA uh, a thing, and I lost my word of mandatory, then if you think about it on the liability side for a business owner, if your policies were not updated and you do have an incident, and then they look at your policies and you're like, well, you guys weren't even doing the minimum standard that you needed to have this policy, but you had it, documentation is everything. So let's say that for these, I purchased basic policies, I maybe threw my name on it, and I'm feeling great with that. And so, who owns the risk in your cybersecurity program? If they say, I have no idea, what do you mean? No clearly defined risk is the answer. Ownership is mapped to roles, reviewed, as people own this process, people own this bit of risk. That is very rare, but is happening more and more. I would say department heads and IT collaborates to define the mitigated risk. That's a really solid answer, and what we hope to at least get to as an organization. IT owns risk without business involvement. That is what we hear the most. And so I'm going to mark that one. Do you have a formal security or risk committee? I know it sounds like that's overkill and who does that, but really it's as simple as saying a formal meeting to talk about risk and what do we need to do quarterly. And even if it's a 5-person organization, you have 2 people that get together quarterly to talk about where are we? Have we changed anything? Are we going those lines of business? Are we hiring more employees? And do we should we update these policies? Things like that. It's not, it sounds like formal risk and committee, but it's not. It's as simple as a quarterly meeting to focus on these efforts.
And so,
Um,
Maria, speaking to the MSP and service providers that would be watching this, this would be a great opportunity for them to consult and guide their customers and say, hey, let's facilitate having this with you. We're not necessarily the experts, but let's have a generic conversation. We can answer some questions you have, make sure you're understanding. And more importantly, they can shift some of that liability to their customer by having their customer actually give them the correct answers and document that, correct?
that's very, yes, it's correct. And partnering this with the risk questions for the organization is just further support that the business owner it starts having opening their eyes and having opens that conversation. So many times MSPs are like, well, I told them that they needed an MFA for years, or I told them that, we really needed to put in, this license because of the security features in it. And what the business owners here is money. And we're shifting that conversation from being about finances to being about risk and ownership and governance. So that this is what I was also hoping would be a good tool. And why I thought it was so important to speak in a business owner's language instead of an IT language that always makes them wash over, or they think ching 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 ching, I'm gonna have to spend more money. So
Yeah,
this,
and so we're down to 7 minutes, but Mary Elizabeth asks in the chat, can you have the quarterly meeting be with a security consultant in case your company is really small? Is that still legit? And real quick, Mary Elizabeth, absolutely you can outsource any of these types of services. It's just they're another third party that you got to do the right things. So whether it be a generic thing that you're going to do or regulated, there's always options to work with third parties and have third parties do that. And Maria, you are a third party that can do these kinds of things. You want to dig into that more deeply?
Yes, as far as what Praxis does is that we are pure GRC, and we've been part of a lot of quarterly meetings, and we partner with a lot of technology firms that are lacking some of these skills. And since we're not actually a technology firm, we are a pure governance risk compliance firm. We work really well and have been able to be in meetings and guide those conversations, because we bridge that gap of what the compliance is or what the regulations or what we're doing for governance, and be more than happy to be a part of those conversations 100%. So I know you said 7 minutes, so I'm going to go through these really, really fast. So we have this regular committees. Let's say we have them ad hoc. There we go. A third party evaluate and govern it. We already had a long conversation about the third party vendors, and the importance of that. So I will say we check it one time while we onboard. But to be honest, most organizations do no assessments. Um, they just say a lot of times businesses are worried about the contract. So the only thing I'll add here is that they might say, well, we have signed the contract and this and that, but like I said earlier, make sure there's specific languages in those contracts that say how they're handling their data and that they are responsible for doing minimum security requirements. So I'll say one-time check during onboarding. You know what? I'm gonna change it to no, because that I think would be the most common answer. How's your is employee cybersecurity awareness governed? I talked about this too. Do we have a tool? Do we do the one time? Do we do a yearly training? One time or occasional training is what we hear a lot. It's either no training, but I think we hear more the one time training, um, or annual training without tracking effectiveness. Um, I'll change it to that because I think That's more often than not the case. How is incident response structured and governed? Again, this is the governance one. Are there playbooks, basic plans? Plans exist, tested occasionally. We don't hear often. What we hear the most is no plans. How does your organization handle compliance and audits? No compliance frameworks or preparation. Relatively prepares only for external audits, some internal checks and external audits, and annual internal audits and assessments are planned. And again, what we'd love to hear, ongoing compliance monitoring, audit. And compliance, I just want to add here, the compliance could be your own compliance. As an organization, you can say, I want to have, as a business owner, I want my organization to meet the minimum security standards, which are these 8 things. And that could be your internal compliance. So even if you're not in a regulated industry, you can take a CIS and say, I want to do implementation group 1, and that's who we want to be as an organization. So I just wanted to, I'd like to throw that in there often. But what we hear often is mainly we just prepare for external audits. What kind of security metrics are tracked? No metrics, limited metrics are not tracked, shared. Some metrics shared with IT or operations, key metrics shared with business holder stakeholders quarterly and defined as governance linked KPIs. Again, that is for a mature company. Not smaller companies don't measure KPIs. But as we mentioned earlier with Teresa, that POAM, that plan of action and milestone, and rechecking that, doing that assessment to see where you are on that baseline. If you've lowered risk, those are metrics. And making sure that you document once something's implemented, that has been implemented and the POAM has been updated. That's getting metrics. And we also get lots of metrics from our IT partners or your IT team that can run scans for, and again, keep in mind that is only for the technical controls, but there it's easy to get metrics and make sure they're measured and documented, which is also very important. So for the purposes of this, we'll say limited metrics tracked but not shared. And is there a formal review process for your cybersecurity governance practices? Again, we have no formal reviews, informal reviews during any annual planning review after incidents and audits only, which is when most organizations start looking at their governance practices. Annual governance review with feedback from stakeholders, and executive team and risk committee led annual governance maturity assessments with benchmarks. A lot of compliances like HIPAA require the last one. But that's usually not done, or it's just marked as done. You kind of peruse, yeah, everything's about the same. And even then, so I would dig into this a little bit more with your business owner, or to kind of understand where they are with it, especially if they say, no, we're compliant to this and it requires an annual one. Since it's not a certified one, it kind of gets loosey goosey. So might be more of the annual governance. What we see the most is review only after incidents. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that one. So we get here, we have a score of 35 out of 50. And you're at limited governance. And what we say is we're in progress, but there's still a lot to be done there due to some of those answers, and then dig into how that maturity can get a little bit better, but we're still here in the red. So I'm going to pause there because I know I'm right at time, and see if anybody has any questions. And that's where I'll pause.
Are there any questions from anybody? Okay, so thank you, Maria. Appreciate it. To the attendees, I will be sending the spreadsheets by actual email in addition to the chat. So for those of you that were having difficulty downloading them from the chat, it's probably because you're anonymous users, but you'll receive the email with the workbooks later today. And if you have any further information, please reach out to Maria. I will include her information is already in the chat, but I will also include it in the email to all the attendees. for both her email and her LinkedIn profile. Maria, any closing thoughts?
No, I just thank you so much, Christopher, for letting me go through this. Thank you, Mary Elizabeth, for your kind comments. I'm very passionate again. Stay in my lane with GRC, and I'm available for any questions or any further conversation about the GRC and these and how to use these tools and more talking points. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Have fun all. Bye-bye.